Okay, welcome back to the Bridgeton Beacon. I have the true pleasure today to be speaking with Mrs. Harriett Weber. We just finished a really nice lunch at my mom and dad's house, Bob and Jane McCormick, and Mrs. Weber has been gracious enough to speak with me today, in particular about an organization that I just became aware of. But it certainly has been around for quite a long time. By my math, the Seven Oaks Club will actually have its 130th anniversary this coming year. It was formed in 1895 by a group of women in the Bridgeton, Cumberland County area, and it has been going strong ever since. Mrs. Weber is a member, and I'm hoping you can give me some insight as to your experiences with this club, which I take to understand is art, culture, music, education. It looks like there have been meetings on a regular basis over the last 130 years where there are speakers that come in and really educate and inform the women of our area. So is that a fair representation of the club, or has it evolved over the years?
It is, and in the beginning, I think they used to meet twice a month, but then it's just once a month now, usually the first Tuesday of the month. We don't meet in the summertime, but...
Where do you meet?
Well, the group membership has become so large that we no longer meet in private homes, which we used to do. And we meet at the West Cumberland Senior Center because that can accommodate a larger group.
Right out in Hopewell Township?
That is correct.
Okay. So how long have you been a member of the group?
Since 1971, which would make it 53 years at this point in time. So I'm one of the elders of the group.
So tell me what the group generally talks about and meets when you meet.
Well, we often have an outside speaker, but not always. Sometimes the members will put on the programs themselves. And we have a formal meeting every month that we meet, except for April. And that is like club day. It's a fun day. So we have a very, very short business meeting. And then we get into doing something that's fun. And next year we plan, because I believe it's on April 1st, which is April Fool's Day, we're going to have an April Foolish Fashion Day, which means that people will come dressed up in a humorous sort of outfit. So we'll see how that goes. That would be a first.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Well, I was able to get my hands on a copy of a history of the Seven Oaks Club. But this was a history, it says a brief history of the first 100 years. And so this book was published in 1995. Which would have been the 100th year anniversary. And in the beginning of the book, they talk about an article that was printed in an issue of the Daily Pioneer, the women's edition. And it said, quote, came into the mind of one progressive woman to broaden her own as well as other lives by stimulating a mental growth and a lively interest in the living events of the day, which should relegate the trifles where they belong to a subordinate place. And it goes on to talk about it being a group of wives, mothers, sisters, that apparently was formed in 1895 on the lawn in front of a Mrs. Jonathan Elmer's home, which I thought was a neat way for this to have started, because there was 7 oak trees on that front lawn. So I'm going to have to try to find out what house that was and see if those 7 oak trees are still there.
Sure. I think it gave an address in the book of 220 Commerce Street.
I think it was East Commerce, 40 or 220.
And one of the things that signify, carry on the tradition of the oak tree, is when you become a member, you get a pin, a lapel pin of an oak tree.
Oh, that's
so all new members are given that.
I should have had you wear it today.
We are required to wear it to all our meetings.
Oh.
And for some of the women that forget, we have name badges. They leave their oak tree on their name badge so they don't have to remember to do that. But the interesting thing to me, why I was so pleased to become asked to become a member of this group several years ago, this group of women are responsible for seeding the idea of the Bridgeton Hospital.
I did not know
that. Came into being in 1898, I believe. The club started in 1895. But these women, through their local influential businessmen, husbands, or whatever, I think seeded the idea. And that is something that 7/8 can really be proud of.
So they saw a need.
They saw a need, and I think it started with just a couple beds here, and it grew. And in fact, I think what became one of the nursing homes was a gray building, wasn't the original hospital. But
and I noticed in the book that, again, every meeting was a different speaker, and those speakers, we could be here all afternoon if I were to name all the different speakers that the club has hosted over the last 130 years. But some of the speakers were about literature, some were about music, some were about education, but there were quite a few presentations by doctors about health issues.
Right.
Is that still the case?
Yeah. No, not today. Doctors are too busy.
Right.
And when you talk about art, music, and literature, in the past, there was a junior women's civic club in Bridgeton, and they would sponsor a table topic tea every year. And any women's club could put entries in that. And my good friend Carol Gould and I decided to set a card table for this table topic tea. First year, we got a first place ribbon. So we did it the second year. And the topic, the theme was either art, music, or literature. And the second year, we got second place. So we did it a third year, and we got third place. And we saw where this trend was going, so we never did it again.
You should have quit while you were ahead.
Right.
There is a motto, and I never took Latin. It is a Latin, so I'm going to probably mispronounce it. But the motto is, I'm going to spell it actually, UT. Yeah, I don't know either. So, but it means quietly or softly useful, which I think is interesting in light of what you said about the club being instrumental in the forming of the hospital.
Right. And it's always been putting the community first. We have dues, but we're not fundraisers. So combining our dues at the end of our season, we make donations locally to a lot of worthy causes, and some we have done for years.
And there is correct me if I'm wrong, but a National Federation of Women's Organizations that it is part of, or at least at one time was part of?
Yeah, Seven Oaks was part of that. And in myself reading the history long before my time, they discovered they were spending so much of their budget to belong to this women's federation that they decided not to continue to be part of that, so they could give the money that they had, the resources they had at the end of the year, to donate to local causes.
To keep it local.
Right.
That makes sense. Another thing that I thought was really interesting, there are so many local women that have been part of this organization over its many years. One of the things that this publication said that was when members passed away, the saying was, we cannot say, we will not say that they are dead, they're just away. Which I think is kind of a nice way of they're still part of
a
history of the
more
organization.
gentle
Right.
touch.
Exactly. More.
And then a donation is always made, what used to be made to the Bridgeton Library or Cumberland County Library in their memory, a book that would have been of interest to that individual.
Do you recall how you became a member? Do other members bring every year? Do you bring new members in, or how does that work?
Yes, I think I became, my good friend Carol Gould is the one that introduced me to 7X Club. And I think I became a member also because my mother-in-law, Esther Weber, was a member. And it's sort of like if you were a 7Oak member and then maybe your acorn came along, the next generation. And at that time, we actually voted on members, but there was never a negative vote. We would go through the paper ballots, somebody would count them, and that's how you became a member. Today, you're expected to, a sponsor, to bring you to the meetings a couple of times so people can kind of get to know you, and then propose, if you're interested in becoming a member, there'd be a write-up a little bit about you, and that would be presented by your sponsor. And then you became a member. There's no more voting on a member.
And how do you go about soliciting and organizing the speakers that come in? Is that up to each member? Do you have a turn in terms of who you're supposed to bring in?
Well, in the past, we used to have one of the vice presidents would be program chairman. And that was a huge responsibility for one person.
Sure.
So what we do today, in the summertime, the president will call, set aside a date, and those that are interested in coming to offer suggestions for meetings, we will get together, come up with suggestions. Then we usually have a second meeting to decide to fill the calendar. And that's kind of the way we do it. Do have speakers come from the outside that we pay, give them a stipend. But members also put on programs. And of course, we don't get paid for that. We don't expect it. That's just part of becoming a member.
Right. Well, I would imagine, too, that when the organization first started, for the most part, it seems like most of the members were what we would refer to nowadays as like stay-at-home moms, right?
Right.
Now, I'm sure so many women that are members have careers in their own right that they're able to speak upon topics that they're familiar with from that perspective.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are a lot of members with a lot of different interests. We have a lot of teachers. We have retired nurses, of which I am one. That's why I am so pleased to be part of the group that started the Bridgeton Hospital, which is where I went for my first job after becoming a registered nurse. So that's important to me. And we do have a limited number of members. I'm not quite sure what the number is. It's around 40. It used to be fewer members than that, and that's when we could meet in individual homes, which was really a nice affair to go.
Personal.
Yes, it really was. But times have changed because you used to go into a home and there would be the linen tablecloth on the table for refreshments. There would be coffee or tea, in the fall, cider maybe. But today, and there was always the china cups and saucers, the silverware, the fresh flowers on the table. But today's woman's life is different. So many women are working or have worked, have had careers, and just life in general is different today.
Sure.
So we're in no longer the china and silver generation, but the paper plates, the plastic tablecloths, the styrofoam cup generation, because it's quicker and easier.
But I would imagine that the friendship and the fellowships are still just as strong.
Oh, yes, it is. It is.
And maybe that gives you the freedom to spend more time on that aspect of it. I don't know.
And one of the things that I like about what we're doing today, when we meet at the senior center, we sit around tables. But instead of sitting with people that you know, the name badges are prearranged before we get there. So we get the opportunity to know the 38th member, the 39th member, or whatever, where before, if you kind of sat with the people that you never got to know the other people, which are really interesting people. So that has been really exciting for me in the last 3 or 4 years that they have been doing this.
That's a nice thing to do. I'm sure in the beginning, people might have been like, I want to sit where I want to sit, but being forced to have an assigned seat will definitely do that.
So we have a big variety of topics. There are a lot of social programs in the area, and people will come and speak about their particular interests. And some of the members of our group have different talents, and they will. In fact, I was honored a year ago to speak on quilting.
I want to speak to you about your quilting. That's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
But why we talk about it now?
Yeah,
You brought it up because
and
we're talking about that at lunch.
Yeah, it was a great opportunity for me to tell about the history of quilting. That was my topic. And the interesting thing, I just did it last year. The interesting thing is I had given the exact same program 43 years prior to the same group of people. I don't
Did it change?
For the most part, 43 years ago, there weren't that many members that are still here today. And if they were, I think they probably would not have remembered that program. And so that was kind of exciting because I had already done the research, already had it. And then I took some of the things that I made and was able to show and tell and a little bit about quilting, which is a whole new topic in and of itself, really.
Well, how did you get started with quilting?
As a child, we did not have central air in the house at all.
When did you grow up?
In Canton, Lower Irish Creek. My parents had what is now the Canton Country Store.
Salem County.
In Salem County. It was built, my great-grandfather, my grandfather had it, and then my mother and father had the store. So I grew up the oldest of 5. And I remember as a small child in the wintertime sleeping under 3 or 4 quilts and how colorful they were. And I was so small, to turn over was an effort because of the weight of the quilts, but I was warm. So I always wanted to learn to quilt, and nobody in my family quilted. I don't know where these quilts came from that I slept under. And then a few years ago, Bridgeton High School had an adult night school. And every fall and spring, they would have different classes.
Now, when you say a few years ago,
50 years ago, 50 plus. Anyway, I saw they had a class for quilting. I thought, oh my goodness. So I signed up, and then a week before, I get a phone call. We're canceling the class because we don't have enough people. And I said, how many do you need? They needed 10. And they had a few sign up. And I said, if I can make it up to 10, will you hold the class? And they said, yes. I got on the phone to all my friends in Shiloh, and we signed up. And that's where I started back in 1973, I think it was. I'm not sure about that.
So right around when you started with Seven Oaks.
Right. So anyway.
You have been quilting ever since, and now even teach a quilting course at West Cumberland Senior Center?
Yes. In 2007, West Cumberland Senior Center opened up, and somebody knew that I quilted and asked if I would teach quilting. And I had belonged to a quilt group in Cherry Hill, Love Apple Quilters, for 30-some years. And then the drive became more than I wanted to make. I would get home too late at night. So I did have some experience, but I had never really taught before. But over the years, and looking back over my notes recently, there have been 25 people that I have taught to quilt. Some have kept on with it, started with me in the beginning at Bridgeton High School, and are still quilting.
What's about quilting that you like? Is it that memory from being a child and sleeping under those quilts?
Well, that was the beginning, but I find it relaxing. And I used to have a rather stressful job in my career, and something about coming home in the evening, poking that needle into
Because you were explaining to me, and you hand sew the quilts. You don't use the
I use the machine to sew them to the tops together. But a quilt is a sandwich. It's the piece top, the batting, and the backing. So to put those 3 layers together, they're basted, and then I quilt them together by hand. Today, a lot of women will use their home sewing machines to quilt, or you can send them out that people will quilt for you. There's also a machine called a long arm quilting machine. They can put a whole large quilt on it, program it with a computer, the design. But the best part for me is the hand quilting because it's relaxing. I can pick it up, put it down, go back to it.
What do you do with all of your quilts when they're finished?
Well, in the past, I have shared some with a gallery, 50 in Bridgeton, for their Christmas fun when they have a Christmas shop to sell things. But then a few years ago, I decided I really didn't want to sell it. It's such a part of you, spend so much time with it. And so my family has more than they'll ever use. I've only made 9 double bed quilts, but I've made well over 200 wall hangings.
Oh, wow.
So what do I do with them? I usually maybe have 1 or 2 hanging in my house because I just don't get around to doing it. But also at the senior center, our group will line the walls of the large room with quilts. We change every month.
I'm going to try to get some footage of that.
Yeah, and so what do I do with them? I have a spare room at home, has twin beds in it, and each bed is probably 2 feet higher than the other bed. And these are not folded quilts. They are spread out, and they're that much better.
Wow.
So I said to my daughter-in-law, I said, I need to probably give you some sort of a value for the quilts. And then you can take them to the gallery. They can take their percentage, sell them, after. And she said, I'm not going to do that. And I said, what are you going to do? She says, I'm going to keep them. She has no idea how many. So, anyway.
Maybe she will after watching this.
I don't know.
You had mentioned that the quilting group that you are a teacher for, that you're part of, also donates items to area organizations. Is that right? And do you have a name for that?
Yes. Our name is the Downing Street Quilters.
Downing?
Downing. Like
Owning?
Yes. And the reason for the name is that when the senior center first opened, the name was Downing Street. And then they changed the name to honor a local person. And I said to the mayor, I said, how could you do that? We named our quilt group. And he said, you'll have to change your quilt group's name. No, we didn't change the quilt group's name.
Good.
So we are the Downing Street Quilters.
Can anyone come to this?
Yes. Okay. Yes, it is open to anyone who wants to come. And several people have come in and out through the years. Some have stayed with quilting. Some have decided it just wasn't for them, or family obligations, whatever, couldn't continue or moved away.
When do you meet?
We meet the first and third Wednesday of every month, except July and August.
So the first and third Wednesday of every month except July and August. And that's the same location that the Seven Oaks Club meets.
That is correct. It is behind the farmer's market off 49. And we meet from 9:30 till noon. Okay. And at this point in time, in the very beginning, yes, I did come and teach. But the ladies have been there so long that people are bringing their own patterns. We see a pattern that somebody else has that we'd like to do that, we'll join in.
Now, when I think of quilts, I think of the squares put together. Is that a type of quilt, or is that something completely different?
That's a patchwork quilt.
Patchwork quilt.
But they're also applique quilts where you can have just a large background and then just applique flowers or figures or whatever on. In fact, this past summer, I finished one I had the book for a long time, didn't do anything with it, and it had a birdhouse and a 3D bird, and it looks like a goldfinch, so I call it Yellow Bird. But it's got all kinds of applique leaves with buttons on, like a vine growing around the birdhouse.
It's truly a work of art.
Yeah, I think it is. You have an eye for color, an eye for material. And from time to time, we actually get donations of material, which is great if we want to experiment with something. Because material, when I first started sewing, making quilts, $3 a yard. And now we're up $13, $14, $18 a yard for 100% cotton, which is all I use.
Most of your material.
Well, that's a bit of a problem today because so many quilt shops have gone out of business. But there's still a quilt shop or a fabric store in Vineland, the Pincushion, but sells a lot of other materials besides quilting materials. But they still give some lessons there. So that's the only real local one. And so I've bought a lot when I've been out in Pennsylvania, in Lancaster area, because they're heavily into quilting there. And you can get a lot.
Place in your room, in your house, rather, that you like to do your work, or do you take it wherever you go?
Well, actually, when I put the top together, if it's not appliqued by hand, it is machine put together. So I have a sewing room upstairs that my husband tore out the attic stairs that were very steep, and we have pull-down stairs. So in that alcove is my sewing machine, shelves for fabric. And so I do my sewing machine work there. But then throughout the house, it's very portable when you're quilting. You can take it anywhere. You can take it on a trip. I've even given lessons on a plane to airline hostesses in the past. I'm working on, how do you do that? Empty seat, they sit down. So,
and that's such a wonderful skill that, you know, unless it's passed along, it's going to be a dying art.
Right, but there's, in the 1976s, you know, the bicentennial, it was kind of a resurgence that people got back into quilting, and it was just before that I started.
Was there a group of women that quilted downtown? I interviewed Sharon Kiefer of Gallery 50, and when we were walking through Gallery 50, she mentioned that there was some quilting that had been completed by a group of women at the Seven Sisters store.
I think years ago at the hospital in Bridgeton, in the lobby, there was a quilt made by a lot of local women. They each made a block of some place in Bridgeton. And I don't know where that quilt is today. And I don't know that they were a group that did that. I know there were individuals that would applique a building or whatever, and then the whole thing was put together, and it was like at least a double bedside, full-size quilt.
Well, it would be neat to
and I'm not
try to track that down.
Right. I'm not sure. I don't know where that is today.
You mentioned that this gave you like almost like a stress relief from when you came home from your job. Tell me about your career as a nurse.
I started at Bridgeton as a young nurse. I was 20 years old. And fortunately, the law had been changed, I think, just the year before, that to become a registered nurse, you used to have to be 21. And I was only 20.
Okay.
But it was changed. So you take the state boards, and which all-day affair and all these different disciplines that you learn through.
Where did you get a nursing school?
I went to school at the Memorial Hospital School of Nursing in Wilmington, Delaware, which is no longer. I watched it being imploded on the TV one day. I have a brick from there. And as of last year, we no longer have alumni meetings because there are so few of us left after all those years. So I lived on the borderline between Salem County and Cumberland County, but the only doctor I knew was our family physician, Dr. Carl Ware, was Carol Gould's father. So I decided to go to Bridgeton Hospital to work. And there I worked for 38 years, but most of those years were part-time while I was raising two boys. So.
And if we can just shift gears for a minute, you and your husband owned the infamous Weber's Candy Store in downtown Bridgeton, which was in operation, I think, in total of 123 years.
That is correct. It was started by my husband's grandfather, the original William Frederick Weber, and then his father, and my husband's William Frederick Weber III, and our oldest son, William Frederick Weber IV, was the last owner, and it was in operation from 1888 to 2011, I believe. And my husband became ill at that time, and he and my son made all the chocolates from scratch. Candy canes, clear toys at Christmas, Easter eggs with your name on. And to this day, people will come up to me. I just became the add-on after I stopped working at the hospital. And I would go down and help do what little I could do. One of the things that we did do was pull together a book, a nice story about the candy store. And a video.
I would love to check that out, because anyone that you speak to about or speak with about growing up in Bridgeton and going downtown, one of the first thing everybody talks about is Weber's Candy. And of course, the only candy store that I know of that you could get your tennis racket strung in.
Well, that came about because my husband's father was a pretty good tennis player in the state of New Jersey. And my husband played tennis in school and after. And then I learned to play. And I loved it. And we played until my husband had a second knee replacement, and then we stopped playing. But it's a wonderful sport, and one that's very popular in Bridgeton.
Sure is. Where would you go to play when you played?
Georgetown Swim Club.
I played on that court.
Yeah. We when it first was formed, we joined as a young family so the boys could learn to swim, which they did. And yes, I used to get up early in the morning and meet three friends. We would play doubles, and then I'd go on to the hospital, change my clothes, and work the rest of the day.
It's great. When you were, it seems to me that you had a very busy, like many people, but had a very busy family life between working as a nurse and the candy store, and yet you still found time for civic involvement with clubs like Seven Oaks, with quilting. Why was all of that important to you?
I guess I've always had a lot of energy. It's kind of fading a little bit now, but I'm still doing quite a bit for my age, I think. But so I was never one to just sit still. I think growing up, being the oldest of five, you have a responsibility for the younger ones as they come along. We had a business. I learned to work in the business when I could make change for a dime. Sodas were a nickel. They gave you a dime, you give them back a nickel. So I always say from about 10 or 11, it seems like I had my hand in retail or working or doing something. It's just what I do. I just need to have something at the end of the day. Well, what did I do today? Besides get up and eat. And cleaning, not so important. Creating, more important.
They're true words of wisdom right there. You have lived in your home out in Shiloh for how many years?
65. We moved there when my oldest son, was 2 months old. So we've been part of the Shiloh community for a long time. It's a great place for children to grow up. They went to school in Shiloh. Mm-hmm. And we developed lifelong friendships with people that are still there and still our friends.
Very close-knit community for sure.
It is. Yeah.
And there's something special about a home, right? And I'm glad to hear you say, though, that cleaning's not so important.
No. You have to keep doing it.
Well, right. Well, it just never goes away.
Well, I'll never be known for being a good housekeeper, but I hope people will remember my quilts.
I think they will. I think they will for sure. I would love to have some photographs of some of your quilts to share with our listeners and our viewers.
Okay, that can be done.
What do you think in terms of, just returning for a few minutes to the Seven Oaks Club, of all of the presenters, are there any that stand out to you that as some important ones that you want to share with us?
Yeah, and in the beginning, we often look for speakers that could tell us a story that were free programs, community things about TNT, electric company or whatever. It always had speakers come in. But one of the most valuable speakers to me, we had a lawyer once that spoke to this group of women and said how important it was for a woman to really have some resources of her own, after you're married, not taking anything away from the husband or anything like that. But I still find today sometimes when people lose their mate, they're kind of at a loss. So I got a lot out of his talk that day. And I was a very new member at the time and a very young bride. And I gained a lot from his talk that day. It
stayed with you.
Yes, it did.
Well, that idea of being able to have an independence and an independent persona is important.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was, to me, it always was. And I had a husband that understood that and supported it in every single way he could. And it was not a problem. One of the interesting things in reading through that same history of the book was the names of the women. At first, they started sort of with their own name, and then they're Mrs. somebody. You're losing your personal identity. You become part of him. But which Mrs. So-and-so are you? He could have had a second wife or, whatever.
Noticed that as well.
And I thought that really strange that they started off with their own names and then went under the name of the husband, which kind of made me feel that maybe they felt less important than their husband. And that's why I don't know. Mm-hmm. I never, that was not my perspective, no.
Well, and I would imagine that having a family business that is so long-standing and so busy, such as Weber's Candy, could be all-consuming, right? You really truly live the business, and that's you grew up with a family business, right? But you were still able to not let that necessarily define you, although I'm sure everybody wants to talk to you about Weber's Candy, but you were able to have more.
I was able to have a career as a nurse, and I loved being a nurse. I really did. In fact, I was never going to get married. I just wanted the career as a nurse. I met my husband on a blind date.
Really? Who set you up? Do you remember?
Frank Masteraki.
Superintendent. Bridgeton.
He was a patient of mine. His wife invited me for dinner. What happened? I was lamenting. I was a young nurse, a couple of years in, and it was back in the time where nurses got patients ready for bed at night. He was a patient. You'd rub their back. They don't do that anymore. And he said, and I was lamenting, everybody wants me to meet their son, their nephew, their brother, their cousin. I'm not interested. So one night he says, I know you don't want to hear this, Miss Parkell, but there's this young man I think you should meet.
And how old were you then?
22. And no, I was, yeah, that's right, 22, round that. So that was fine. He was discharged. And then a couple of weeks later, I got a call from his wife. Would I come to dinner? And I thought, oh, that's nice. Nobody ever asked me to do that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it was a dinner party, and I found out ahead of time, and I thought, oh, I can't do this. I don't know these people. I don't even know the Masteraki. And I thought, but I've accepted. How can I say no? So I went, and sitting across from me was Fred Weber. I looked in his blue eyes, and I knew I absolutely knew.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
9 months later, we were married.
Wow.
In about 4 months, we were engaged. He was 7 years older than me, but he was ready. He waited for me.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful.
So anyway, that's my story.
And you ended up having, tell me about your children, grandchildren.
I have 2 boys. Will, he goes by Will, because my husband said when he was born, being the 4th William Frederick Weber, he said, he's not going to be Fred. I never knew if my mother was calling me or Dad. So Will was his great-grandfather's nickname. He was called Will.
That's neat.
And I thought, oh, Will sounds so old for that little tiny But we had Will, and he was in the candy business, and I had a son, Mark Weber, and he became a executive vice president at a large bank. He's retired, and he had no interest in the candy business, and he did very well in his business. And one granddaughter, and she lives in Connecticut and works in Connecticut.
Wonderful.
So anyway,
I would love to speak with you, and maybe I could get my hands on a copy of the Weber's candy history that you referred to a couple minutes ago, because I would love to talk about that.
okay.
Maybe even in more detail at some point.
Okay, that would be great.
And you're down here in the Ocean City area. You've spent a lot of time at the beach.
Right, I do.
You like the beach like I do, which is nice to hear.
Yes.
And it's nice to hear that you are able to maintain all those connections in the Salem County, Cumberland County area, which is, obviously so important to you.
Well, my husband is the one that brought me to Ocean City. I'd never been here before. So
Once you get your feet in the sand, it's hard to go back.
it is. It's a great family resort area.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks from Bridgeton who vacation in
Yeah.
the city, for
Yeah.
sure.
You don't have the bars. There's the Boulevard bar outside, but you don't have the problems that a lot of drinking on islands
Mhm.
can lead to.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to talk to you about just for a few minutes, if we could, is you have been a member of First Presbyterian Church for many, many years. Is that correct?
Yes, my husband took me there. We were married there
Mm-hmm.
in 1957.
And then it's got such a rich history.
Yeah.
It does. And are you still a member of?
I am. In fact, my minister was just visiting me over the weekend down here, our current minister.
Wonderful.
Yes, and I'm involved there, not as much as they would like me to be, I think, but I just have a certain balance in my life, and I am a member of the Presby Perennials Garden Club, and we put on a tea. We did it every year until COVID, and then after COVID, this year was our 10th tea that we put on. It's sort of a fundraiser, and then we donate all that money out.
Is that an organization through the church? Or
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
What's the name of that again?
Presby Perennials. We were looking for a name for a garden club. Plant the flowers outside, keep them watered. Flowers in the church. We're responsible for that. And then someone came up with the idea to have a formal tea, which is very well received. We fill all the tables.
When is that tea?
It's in the spring,
Mm-hmm.
usually after Easter, not always, but around end of March, beginning of April, somewhere in there. And it's a lot of good food. And we make everything. We donate everything. We do sell tickets. And as I say, that money then is dispersed to within the area, Bridgeton area.
That's such a wonderful thing to do. It seems like that's a lot of what you do is giving back to the community.
Yeah, I guess I never really thought of that, but the name came about because we were trying to come up with a name, and somebody came up with the name Blooming Idiots. I won't say it was one of our previous pastors being funny. His wife said that.
That's funny.
But then came down that perennial, you're always coming back.
Mm-hmm.
We're Presbyterian, so between coming back to church and
Well, that's such an active church. I grew up on Lake Street, as you know, which is right around the corner. And when I was younger, I was very good friends with the Hallfelder children.
Oh, yes.
And
great people.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Yeah, we really, really enjoyed having them there.
Sure.
So time marches on.
That it does. That it does. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you today. And you've been friends with my parents for decades, and today was the first day that we ever met. So I'm really honored to meet you, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to let me hook you up to the mic here. And
well, I appreciate
your words of wisdom.
I appreciate the opportunity, Megan. It's been great meeting you.
It's been great meeting you as well, and maybe we can do this again.
Perhaps.
I would
Don't
like
be
to.
too long at my age.
Well, we'll definitely have you back on. And at the rate you're going, you're pretty busy, which I think is just a wonderful thing to say.
It is. I'm fortunate.
Well, thank you again. All right, so we are back with Mrs. Harriett Weber, and we are at the West Cumberland Senior Center. And Mrs. Weber is going to introduce us to one of her friends.
This is Holly Hunter. Now, I'm sorry. Honey the Hunter. Honey's my name, and hunting's my game. I love it whether I'm in my deer stand, my duck blind, or my boat fishing. It's all relaxing and rewarding to me. However, when I have time off from my hunting adventures, I love coming to be with my friends at the West Cumberland Senior Center. I could be here daily and not get bored because there is so much to do. There is no excuse to be bored. Be sure to pick up a calendar each month so you know what's going on. You can even get the calendar on West Cumberland Senior Center Facebook page. This is Honey the Hunter.
And I see her boots.
Yes, she's all ready for the hunting season.
And you told us about how she changes her persona with the seasons.
Yeah, she came to the Senior Center just a little over a year ago in September. And at that time, she presented herself as Sunflower Sadie. But she kind of suffers from a multiple personality disorder. And it seems as at the beginning of every month, she becomes a different persona. But she needs help with that. So the kind people here at the Senior Center, the art group, the Bay Gals, the bingo groups, the Mahjong group, the exercise group, different people have participated in dressing our friend here every month. So we never know who she's going to be. I don't know who she will be in November. But it's been kind of fun for all of us to come up with different ideas.
So you take turns deciding what her persona is going to be?
Yes, there's a notebook out front. People sign up when they want to dress her. And she has been an Olympian. She's been a St. Patty's with a frilly little skirt around for St. Patrick's Day. So you never know what she's going to be dressed as. So it's fun.
This is a beautiful senior center. And it is also the home of the Downing Street Quilting Club's quilts that you told me about the other day. So I was hoping you could give me a quick tour and show me some of those quilts that are hanging here on the wall.
Okay, well, this is because it's October. At the beginning of each month, we change the wall decor that's appropriate to the time or the season. So we have a nice fall-looking quilt here. And different members of the Downing Street Quilters, we were organized when the Senior Center opened in 2007. We organized in September and meet twice a month, the first and third Wednesdays of the month. So in the beginning, we taught new quilters. At this point in time, people have been in the group, 3 of us from the very beginning. So we come up with our own patterns or our own designs and share with quilting. But we always try to decorate. While we're here, We could take a look because it's Halloween this month. We have witches. We have pumpkin sprite and a small wall quilt. Another pumpkin sprite. More witches.
Now, who made these decorations? Where did these decorations come from?
The Downing Street Quilters.
Made all of them.
We make, yes, we dabble in a little doll making. Primarily, we are quilters.
Get a little bit.
And we're fortunate here at the Senior Center because we have all these wonderful bookcases and the books are all donated. In fact, we've overflown the bookcase. So I had too many books, so they added another bookcase recently. And people just come in, take a book, bring it back, bring in books, and it's great.
Like an informal library.
It is. It's no signing in and signing out for books.
The honor system.
This one says, in the pumpkin patch on Halloween night, dances a silly pumpkin sprite.
It's beautiful.
I think I'll stay up there. We have a wall hanging up there on the wall.
I missed that one. How long does it take to make one of these quilts?
That's a popular question that every quilter has been asked at some point in time. It's hard to tell because we don't sit down and work from morning to night. We'll cut out a few pieces in our sewing rooms and then we may not get back to it for a couple of days. So it's really hard to predict. The very first quilt I ever made, from the time I thought about what I wanted, got the material, completed the quilt, was 9 months. But other than that, you pick it up, you put it down. So it's hard to tell. I personally make about 4 to 5 pieces a year, but they're wall hangings today. I no longer make the full-size bed quilts, which I have made 9 of, I think.
Now, these are seasonal quilts. How often each year do you change the quilts that are hanging on the wall?
At our first meeting of every month, we meet the first and third Wednesdays of the month. We do not meet in July and August. So every month at the beginning of the month, we will change the quilt.
You change these quilts every month?
Right.
Wow.
Right.
So I could come back every month and I will see
the
new
first
quilts.
Wednesday of the month, there will be a new exhibit.
Sounds like a very strict
You're
rule.
invited back any time. Now, the only thing is with fall, we'll take down the witches, but a lot of these same pieces will stay hanging.
Sure.
Because our group now is down to only 7 people, and that's 6 people. So that's not too many of us to be making quilts. So probably these will stay up. And then December we will have Christmas quilts, and in January is our snow month. And February, of course, hearts and Valentines.
I bet it's very festive at Christmas time.
Yes, it is.
And the detail on these quilts is really amazing.
Almost all of them are hand quilted, which it sort of adds a lot of interest.
And are these quilts based off of patterns?
Yes, we get patterns from books or magazines or online quilt shops. You can buy patterns. Occasionally, one of us might design our own quilts, but all the ones here today are from patterns.
It really gets you in the spirit of the season, being in here. This is just wonderful. I'm going to have to come back.
Good.
And see what it looks like in November and December and January and February and all through the season. So it's been a real pleasure to be able to see these in person. Since we got to speak about them just a few days ago, it always is nice to come. So I really do appreciate you giving us a tour of this beautiful facility, which has been here since 2007, right behind the Amish Market. The West Cumberland Senior Center hosts the Downing Street Quilters, as well as the Seven Oaks Club, which we discussed the other day.
Right.
Well, thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
Always.